Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Erich Kurschat. I'm the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants using the DISC personality assessment. I'm also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of real HR pros solving real HR problems, as we like to say. It's entirely free, chapters around the country, 10 licensed chapters altogether, and more than 2,500 members. You can find out about the HR Hot Seat Mastermind community at, go figure, hrhotseat.com. Today, you have joined us for a Harmony Insights, what am I calling these? Lunch dates, Harmony Insights lunch dates. I've been doing these for a few weeks now, inviting special guests to join me who really inspire me. With so much going on in the world now, I want to take 30 minutes of my lunch hour here in the Central Time between 12 and 12:30 to chat with people that I just really like, that inspire me in some way, so that I can go into my afternoon encouraged to do my best work. And my guest today, Laura Mazzullo, is one of those people. So Laura, welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so happy to see all these friendly and familiar faces joining us today.
Again, Laura, you and I have had but one phone conversation in the past, but I have followed you for quite a bit on LinkedIn and other social media platforms, and I am just thrilled to have you with us today. Could you give people a brief sense of who you are, what company you are here representing today, and what qualifies you, so to speak, um, for this conversation that we have titled, what have we titled it? Connecting with Kindness. I know something that you're very passionate about. So give us just a sense of what you're bringing to this discussion today.
Yeah, of course. And most of you know one of my core values is humility. So I don't ever feel more qualified than anyone else to discuss a topic. But I know that as you said, I'm so passionate about this topic and spend most of my working days thinking about connection, community, kindness. So I started my own recruiting firm 7 years ago called Eastside Staffing, and I focus on the placement of HR professionals in the New York City area. But I've been recruiting for HR since 2007. So I got through that first crisis with the HR community, and here we are again in another trying time. So, in terms of what qualifies me, I think the experience of being so embedded in the HR and recruitment community for this long and really kind of dedicated to this community in a sense of being the advocate and being the cheerleader, but also recognizing how it feels in the downturns and how it feels in the anxiety provoking times like this one. So
Yeah.
I thought it was an important topic that we think about our behavior in times like this and not just, um, kind of like haphazardly trying to communicate, but really slowing it down to think about how we're showing up for each other and, of course, for ourselves too.
Certainly a topic that will be beneficial to HR professionals, but anybody who's joined us today. And we always get a mix of folks, people who are employed, people in job transition, HR folks, non-HR folks, and this idea behind connecting with kindness is something I think that's going to be valuable for everybody who's participating. A couple quick notes before I forget them. Number one, I will be following up with everybody who's attending today via email with resources that we mention and share. So Laura will share some along the way. We'll talk about some things to look into, and you'll get a follow-up email with those. And then as 12:30 is when our conversation will come to a close. And if you need to go about your afternoon at that point, you're welcome to. But Laura has graciously offered to stick around for a few minutes for those of you who would like to unmute yourselves at that point to contribute a thought or a question. Laura, before we get any further, I've been asking my guests to share, to the extent that they feel comfortable, any way that they have been impacted, as we all have been to some extent, any way that you have been impacted by what's going on now with COVID-19, work from home, all of this new stuff that we're trying to figure out.
Yeah. So I am a New Yorker, and many of you know I see my friend Karen here, who's also a New Yorker. It is for us, I think, a particularly unique challenge because we are the epicenter in terms of the number of cases, the number of infections, the number of deaths. And so also I think as city dwellers, it's particularly upsetting when you love a city so much and you see it in disarray. It's a bit of like a heartbreak that's unique. It's how I felt when Notre Dame was burning. It's how I
Yeah.
felt in 9/11. There's a certain intimacy we have with large cities when you are a resident of a city. It truly is like having neighbors and having family members around you. So it was particularly depressing, and I decided to come to my parents' home, and they live in Stamford, Connecticut, which is about 15 minutes north of the city. So hence their basement behind me, which I'm very proud to be in, and really enjoying the company and really enjoying, because I live alone in Manhattan, enjoying kind of just the suburban lifestyle for now. And I think I'll be ready to go back to the city when it feels safe.
Yeah.
But I'm grateful to have a place to be, because frankly, for me, it was almost overstimulation of sadness that, I didn't feel I needed to be witness to every day.
Many of us, well, I and others I know that are on the call today live in the Chicago area. And I think New York City is probably similar. I have seen so many photographs recently of both of our cities really just empty.
Yeah,
People abiding by the shelter in place and keeping their distance and all the things that we're supposed to be doing. But sort of to your point, when you live in a city like this and you're used to that positive energy and the festivals and the just everything that happens. I mean, even people honking at each other in the streets, and then you don't have any of that, and it feels like a ghost town. It can't help but influence the way you go about things and the way that you see life and the way that you approach your relationships and your communication with other people. And that's what we're talking about today: is how is stress
yeah,
impacting our communication? Do we recognize that it is, first of all? And if so, do we care enough to do something about it? Do we want to? Are we able to do something about
yeah,
that? And I know this is a passion of yours because it was the topic that you suggested for today. So let's start out by discussing some of the challenges that you feel our attendees and you personally are facing these days, specifically
yeah,
around the extent to which stress is impacting how you communicate with others.
yeah. So for anyone living in the New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, major cities, I know we're in similar boats. I think I really want to compliment those in our community who are in more rural areas or other parts of the country, because they've been teaching me a lot about asking me how I'm doing, making space for it, making time for it. And when I'm talking to fellow New Yorkers, I see my friend Robin, and we talked about this recently too. New Yorkers are so tough, and we're so gritty, and we're so strong, and so kind of thick-skinned, and it's our culture, it's our subculture that we show up as fighters. And it's been harder for us to help each other. When I talk to someone in California or Texas or wherever, Europe, there's time to ask me how I'm doing, and I find myself asking more, and it's teaching me that let's make room for tears. Let's make room for saying the fears. The first time I was able to cry during this whole crisis was Steve Brown, one of our influencers that we are all so accustomed to. He's in Ohio, and he called me one of the first weeks and just said, "How are you, my friend?" and paused. And I
Mm.
realized no one had ever paused for me with that question till then. And that was so profound. And I thought, okay, I am going to take a stand. I am a loyal New Yorker. I am a tough person, but I don't want that to continue. I want us to make room for each other without judgment. And so that for me has been a big turning point around, you know, are we taking 5 minutes at the start of a call and asking each other how we're doing? Are we judging each other based on how we're doing? Or are we really asking? Um, it sounds so simple, I guess, to say, how are you, and really wait for an answer, but I'm finding it's kind of more rare than I would have expected. Um,
You and I have talked previously about the work that I do with personality styles using DISC specifically, and so
right.
I'm fascinated by this question of how are we individually
Yeah.
taking all of this. You know, there are some of us, I think, who feel sort of imprisoned by this separation and what we perceive as isolation, social isolation, even though, you know, several other lunch dates I've had have reinforced the point that we can be just as connected now as we've ever been, just in a different way. But some of us feel somewhat isolated, and others think, holy cow, like, this is my pace. This is,
Right.
you know, I would prefer to do without the whole virus thing. But you know, I love that things have slowed down, that I've been able to take some things off of my calendar. And I think it's so easy from my experience and my perspective to use the word judge, you know, to be in front of somebody else or talking with somebody else and judge them even unknowingly, simply because they perceive their environment and their situation so differently from how I perceive mine.
Right.
And I'm immediately then ascribing some value to that, as opposed to thinking right off the bat, okay, hold on, pause, as you mentioned, this person, I couldn't possibly know what they're going through, what they value, how they prefer to connect with other people, and their approach is going to be just as valid as my own, and
Right.
just as understandable as my
Someone
own.
used the word with me this morning, acknowledge. They said it's important to acknowledge how we're feeling. And I said, wow, I'm writing that word down. I think it's important we acknowledge it in HR and recruitment, especially. I know most of us joining are in that field, although not all. We tend to acknowledge it in others. So we tend to kind of be overly empathetic, very, whatever you want to call it. We're emotional sponges. We tend to be extroverted. We tend to be outgoing. We tend to be really emotionally intelligent, which is so fantastic. But I'm finding when it comes to ourselves, we are awkward about it because we don't often take the minute to think about, okay, wait, how am I adjusting? Am I acknowledging how I'm doing and feeling? Or am I so worried with everybody else around me that I'm not, taking that minute? I
Yeah,
think it's, and I know, this is something I really wanted to make sure we talked about. And I know it's only 30 minutes, so we could probably talk for 4 hours, but
of course.
the idea of introductory emails has been a huge one for me. So I'm getting now on average about 20 introductory emails a day. So these are people, you can imagine how upsetting it is. A lot of people out of work. I've been laid off due to COVID-19. I would love your advice, would love to brainstorm, would love to have your help with my job search. And as I'm receiving them, they're coming from recruitment leaders, they're coming from HR leaders. The tones have been perhaps, I guess, disappointing. If I was to think of it in a judgmental way, I've been sort of surprised that they're not as kind or soft as I would have expected. And I'm wondering, and I've been curious about, like, why is this the case? Like, are people not really aware that their introductory emails are, frankly, they're the first impression that someone's making in this market? So that's been really a lot of focus of my attention, is kind of educating people on the quality of their emails.
Thank you for that. And that's a poll that we've prepared. Do you read your emails aloud before sending them? And this is a point we're going to spend a little bit of time on. And as people respond to that, I want to acknowledge a few of the things that I'm seeing in the chat area. While you've been talking, Jessica loves the idea of pausing, letting, akin to kind of letting the phone ring a few times and taking a breath before you pick it up. Just to gather yourself, perhaps, if you are feeling stressed. Michael is talking about saying thank you to the front lines and sort of the intentionality behind that. Nicole's saying we're over functioners that don't slow down to see how we actually are. That introspection can be so important.
Well, Nicole and I
Mike's
are kindred spirits and friends, and I think we're both proud of how ambitious and focused we are. But of course, it's times like these that we're the ones that really are like, uh-oh, forgot to see how we're doing. Yeah.
For anyone who attended the WorkHuman live stream that happened yesterday in lieu of the conference they were supposed to have, Simon Sinek was on it, and he was saying that there are going to be a number of people that are just doing right now, that are just making things happen and crossing tasks off of a list and doing, who are not going to be able to process what's going on until we start coming back to the workplace. And everybody else is maybe past the grieving process or have gotten some sort of closure and they're coming back in, figuring out how they fit into the puzzle. There are going to be a number of people that at that point maybe have never been asked how they're doing, or haven't been asking, or maybe have only been asking other people how they've been doing, and are really for the first time going to be attempting to kind of wade through their own emotions and getting closure and whatever you want to call that other folks feel like they're doing now.
Exactly. Exactly. I've been so concerned about that. I keep saying to everyone, like, I really want us to all try to avoid any kind of PTSD coming out of this. And I think the best way to handle that is to have more honest and open discussions. And especially when you're starting a job search in this space, that's new, I guess, advice, right? We've heard in the past, stay professional, stay focused, stay polished. And
Mhm.
if you asked me a year ago to do a video with this background, I would have never let it happen. I would have gone upstairs to my dad's den and taken the art off the wall and made it nice and blown out my hair and wore it. I'm not, even I am out of my comfort zone of, we're showing up as ourselves. We're showing up as human beings first. And I'm delighted to try and lead by example, even that though it's hard.
Yeah.
Um, and I think when you're starting a search, you have to really think about, how am I showing up, and am I being brave? Am I writing in a way that reflects who I am,
Mhm.
or am I just rushing and writing out of panic because I really want help and I'm not thinking twice. I'm just shooting it out.
Yeah. You'll see that I'm sharing the results of our poll. About 33%, it's split three ways. 33% say yes, they read their emails aloud before sending. A third say no, and then a third say that they do sometimes. Why why do you think that that in particular is so important, to the act of sitting and reading your email out loud prior to hitting the send button?
So anyone who's ever talked to me knows that I'll give honest feedback as I see it. And I think as recruiters, we have that responsibility. So if I get an email that I think is really written in a poor tone, first of all, I'm trying to take every call I can. So I hope everyone knows that. Of course, I will respond whether I think the note is awful or not, because I want to teach, I want to
Right.
educate. So when I'm getting some notes that I think can be improved, I've been asking the person on the phone to, will you do me a favor and read the note to me aloud while I have you on the phone? Or can we talk about why you wrote the note this way? If they start reading it aloud, a lot of times they'll stop and say, "Oh my gosh, this sounds so cold and dismissive." Oh no, I didn't even ask you how you're doing, or oh no, I didn't even say like it just was an ask. Like it might just say, "Hi, I'm looking for a new job. Attaches my resume. Is today a good time to talk?" And they'll realize, "Oh, that's not really me. I'm empathetic," or I love what Kelly said here. She asked how people are feeling instead of how they're doing. Those nuances are important even in an introductory note, to think about, how am I showing up here? And so I'll give the feedback of, why don't you rewrite it so going forward more recruiters will reply, more hiring managers will reply. I'm the weird nutto that tries to respond to every single person, but most are going to judge and say, okay, out of the 20 I received, I'm going to pick 3 or 4 of the best notes I got, or the kindest notes I got. And what constitutes as a kind note, I think is open to discussion, but I think it's knowing for yourself, do I want to show up as a kind person? And if I do, is my writing reflective of that? And we're not doing cover letters anymore, but these emails are basically cover letters. They're your first impression. And so I can't stress enough that the introductory notes, I think, are the way forward of how we're showing up. And it's a choice we get to make, really.
I want to expand on your point, and you're talking in terms of the introductory notes when people are asking for your assistance or applying for jobs, et cetera. I want to expand that to LinkedIn, and people who have attended my lunch dates in the past know I can get on the soapbox about how we request connections on LinkedIn. Are we just hitting the connect button?
Right.
Are we saying, hey, we have a number of connections in common, so we should be connected? Like that doesn't tell me anything. That's,
Yeah.
I would much rather, or we'll put it this way, I notice and remember those notes that come through that have some sense of kindness there, whether they're flattering, or they said they've read something I've written, or
Sure.
they like how I've done X, Y, or Z. And it doesn't have to be, overboard, but I think you really pick up on that kindness and remember it when you see it in ways that are, I can't help but think, are beneficial to the sender.
Yeah. And to your point, I think a lot of people, and probably I bet if we raise hands, a lot don't realize this, you can send personalized LinkedIn notes even from your iPhone or from your cell phone.
Right.
They do it extra effort. It's annoying. You have to personalize it. I see Nicole is even saying it's annoying sometimes too, or she's saying it's in a good way. It's an extra effort. But on the phone, you hit the 3 dots and you can say personalized invite, and it's worth it to just say, "Hi, Mike. We're connected on Twitter. Would love to also connect here. Can't wait to kind of continue our conversation." Probably out of 100 invites I get, one has a note, and
Isn't that
that is
amazing?
a really poor ratio.
Yeah.
So and I'm actually I respond to fewer of those because that's more important to me, that I'm cultivating the right community. So you're absolutely right. It's even more than an introductory note. Like, how are you even sending the invitation or the email?
And people will ask then,
Yeah.
well, I don't know what to write. If I don't know the person well, I can't, if I say, how can I be of service to you? They don't know how to answer that question because they don't know me well enough. I've quite often, I will simply say, I'd love to be connected with you, and I'd love to learn from you here. I look forward to learning from you here.
Yeah.
So the implication there is that you're flattering them in some sense. You're saying, I have something to learn from you. I'm not showing up with all the answers myself. And it's a simple way to put, at least to be a bit kind in that note.
Yeah.
Laura, I have seen you a number of times in the past. One thing that I love, and I've said this to you before, I love how you do social media. I love how you show up and you're so authentic and genuine about what you're sharing and what you're posting, and you don't have these all scripted months in advance. You've told me that you take what you're feeling in the moment and put it out there. I think it really comes across in what I see from you. One of the things that you often say is, I see you. you know, HR professionals out there, I see you. Um, I'm always so taken by that. And I think that that's worth spending at least a little bit of time on. Why is it so important for you to say that you see others? And part two to that question is then, does that beg the question, do you also see yourself? Are you introspective, do you think, in the same way that you're attempting to see others? Would you say that you also see yourself and recognize when stress is impacting your own communication?
First of all, thank you. That's the nicest compliment I can receive. And I think having spent so much time embedded in the HR community, I know they don't often feel seen. And so for me, it's important to recognize that, because I think HR professionals tend to be focused on their leaders and their business and their employees and their everyone else, that often they're the underserved community, they're the underappreciated community. And especially when I say recruitment in this context, I mean recruitment under the HR umbrella. That a talent acquisition, of course, is an arm of that. We are also often underseen and underappreciated, and especially coming out of this booming market, we've all been beaten up a little bit because we are giving so much to the candidate experience and the hiring manager experience. And I think we're all a little like, whew, that was a rough 5 years of just give, 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 give. I think now there is that pause where we can see each other and recognize each other. I have a lot of self-esteem in terms of my own self-reflection and make a lot of room for that. I think I would like to also feel more seen from my community. I think those of us here certainly give me that feeling, all the DMs and messages I've gotten in this crisis. But I've been telling my candidates and new candidates, like, make sure you're asking your recruiters questions of themselves. Ask me about my career, my history. Come curious to the discussion. Come with prepared questions. Um, it can't be a one-sided dialogue anymore. I think that was okay the last 5 years, where we all sort of bowed down to the candidate-driven market. I think now, look at what HR pros have done in the last 2 months. They've shown up as miracle workers, and literally they not only deserve respect, but I think it's an obligation to get some semblance of that acknowledgement. Again, that word is still resonating with me today. But yeah, like, let's acknowledge what we're doing as a community.
Yeah.
So hopefully, yes, when I show up to see others, it makes me feel good to do that for them. And I know many are doing it for me, and I think more will continue to do it for each other. But we can't keep hiding as a community. It's really, we have to kind of show people, hey, we deserve some kindness too. And
Right.
when I do these conversations and I educate on the introductory notes, for example, people really are grateful that, oh, I didn't realize that I wasn't showing up and seeing you or seeing who else I'm writing to. And that
Yeah.
maybe is a light bulb moment of, how are you showing up?
S- So in the time that we have left here, which unfortunately is waning, um, what are some very specific tips that you have to share? Resources, tips. I'll let you run with it, but so that the people attending can walk away from this conversation and immediately have a stronger sense of the extent to which stress may be impacting their communication, and then if they choose to, actually do something about that.
So number one, acknowledge your feelings. Like, feel the feelings, cry the cry, scream it out. Like, we have to, because as you said, we want to avoid any post-traumatic stress. We all have it, but let's eliminate it as much as we can. So feel what you're feeling. Have a few safe people you can talk to. Sometimes it's not your closest friends and family. Sometimes it is someone in this weird world of cyber friends we have. It doesn't matter who it is. Just get them out. Two, read your notes out loud. Read your LinkedIn emails, your in-mails, your introductory notes. Read them out loud and ask yourself, am I proud of this message? Does this message reflect my brand? Does this really reflect who I am and how I want to show up? And then thirdly, maybe ask yourself, am I being kind to others? Karen said, here in our business, it was often a one-way street. We were kind to candidates. We didn't care how we were treated back. And we've both talked about this offline. That's an old school way of thinking. We all deserve kindness and respect. HR, recruiters, job seekers, hiring managers. This is not a tit for tat, who was mean to each other, and therefore we can be mean back. I think we have to just show up now and say, let's assume best intentions. I wrote this quote on my desk the other day that was on Twitter, and our friend Jeffrey Shapiro posted it. He said, the best way to find out if you can trust somebody is to trust somebody, by Ernest Hemingway. And I thought, the best way to find out yeah, if you can trust somebody, it's to trust them. Like, show up, assume best intentions. You might be disappointed, they might be a jerk, but let's all go into it saying, I'm going to just trust this new person and hope that they're kind. And I think it sounds simple, but I really think these are tactical ways that we can try and improve.
Yeah, I agree. And it's just again for the perspective for you in case it's helpful. I really see this, and it's one of the many things that I admire about you in the short time that we've known each other. And this came through in a previous conversation and certainly your social media posts. But I feel like these things that you are saying, you very much believe. You know, I think we all have the experience of talking with somebody and they have the marketing lingo down just right, and you can tell they're saying everything that's on their website, and then you look at what they do in their practice and you don't see an alignment. And I think with you, Laura, and that's one of the reasons I was so excited to talk today, that alignment is there. Everything that you're sharing, you strongly believe, and I think it comes through in how you present yourself and your brand, Eastside Staffing, on social media, but then just in your one-off conversations with folks in the meantime. So I can't tell you how appreciative I am that you were willing to spend time with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And whoever wants to stay for Q&A, we'll be on for a few more minutes just to talk a little bit more intimately. And for everybody else, have an amazing rest of your day and stay kind to each other and keep seeing each other and seeing yourself.
Thank you very much for that. If people want to, and I'm sure they're going to want to follow up with you after
Great.
this, how can they find you? Where can they find you online?
Yep. So Twitter and Instagram, I'm at Eastside Staff. LinkedIn, you'll find me as Laura Mazzullo. And also email is just Laura at eastsidestaffing.com. And be kind.
And Laura's
Just
going to
kidding.
send me links to any resources that she would like to share. I'm going to follow up via email with those of you who attended today. The recording of this we will be making available. I'm working through the logistics of that right now, so that will be online. If you've enjoyed this conversation, I hope you will go back to return to harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates. Tomorrow, I'm going to be speaking with Jennifer Tardy from Jennifer Tardy Consulting on learning and sharing your smoke signals. How do you know that you're stressed, and how do you begin to recognize that, and how do you allow others to push in and support you in those times? So kind of a continuation of what we were speaking about today. On this Friday, I'm trying something entirely new that I'm calling a pop-up panel. I have not seen this done before. It sort of goes against traditional panel discussion logic and logistics, but I'm going to invite people to, on the spot, to be a part of a panel on meaningful connection. So if you show up, you want to be considered for the panel, I'm going to consider you. And if you want to show up to just remain in the audience and see how this whole experiment unfolds, I would love for you to be there too. We need folks for this pop-up panel. And if it turns into something, then I can't wait. If it doesn't, at least we tried. So that's a pop-up panel on Friday. And then we have a week coming up next week of additional topics on the how and why behind both LinkedIn and Twitter, a new topic that I just added today that I'm excited about, discovering your voice, and even nurturing your community with John Thurmond of the HR Social Hour half-hour podcast. So a few coming up next week that I'm really excited about. The details about all of that is at harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates. Again, Laura, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Of course.